All right. Okay, so next page is another example, the toy truck example. Okay, now we've got the total cost, marginal cost, and we need to calculate the average total cost. So not for the first one, okay. All right, 80 divided by 1, 105 divided by 2, and no, I can't do that one in my head. Okay, 125 divided by 3. $150 divided by 4. Okay, and then we'll graph the curves, roughly anyway. So remember, for the average total cost, you would put the dot right above the number, like right above the number 1. But for the marginal cost, you put it in between the numbers. So 30, sort of in between 0 and 1. Okay, and then the profit, which I've already got down here. So the calculations are down here already at the bottom. If the price is 50. All right, so if the price is 50, so you find out where the price equals MC, that will be at a quantity of 9. So the price is 50, the quantity will be 9. And then from the table, we know that the average cost, the average cost is 38.89. So that would be here, the average cost. All right. Okay, so the next thing is about what we call the break-even price. And so that's what I was showing you in this diagram here. So this was on the next page. We're going to talk about this price right here. Right, so any price that is above that, they're earning a profit. Any price that's below that, they're losing money. But if the price is exactly equal to that minimum point of the average total cost curve, then price and average total costs are the same, so they are just breaking even. So that's called the break-even price. Okay, so the break-even price is where the marginal cost and the average total cost are equal, and that's at the bottom of the ATC curve. Now, when we say that the firm is breaking even, we have to be a little bit careful. Breaking even means that the profit is 0, right? But in Chapter 9, you learned about 2 types of profit. What were the 2 types of profit from Chapter 9? Accounting profit, economic profit. That's right. And what was the difference? What did the accounting profit not include? Implicit costs, that's right. So the implicit costs were the costs that are like opportunity costs, things that you're giving up, not things you're paying for, but things you're giving up. And so when your accountant calculates the profit, they don't include things you're giving up, but they just include the things that you're paying for. The economic profit is what you calculate to figure out if you're better off or worse off. And that is when you include the other things that you're giving up, right? So if you have your own business, for example, you're giving up time with your family. So you think about that when you're thinking about whether you're better off or worse off, but your accountant's not going to include that. Okay, so when we say that the business is breaking even at this price, this means economic profit. So the business will still be earning an accounting profit. It's just that at that price, the person who owns the business is neither better off nor worse off than whatever else they would be doing with a job, for example. Okay, so breaking even means that the economic profit is 0, not the accounting profit. So the accounting profit is positive. They are making money. It's just that they're not making a lot of money. Okay, so now we're going back to the example with the Ted's tailored suits. And so I already pointed it out. This would be at $130, right? So here, the minimum of the average total cost is at $130. That's where there's the equilibrium with the MC. So that would be at the quantity of 4. Now, the firm will also break even here, right, here and here. If the price is 130, they would break even here and here. But as with lots of other examples that we've talked about, the person, whether you're a consumer or producer, you always choose the equilibrium. So we would say that the quantity is 4. That's where we have the equilibrium here. Good. Okay. All right, so the next thing to talk about is when a firm would have to shut down. Okay, now there's 2 concepts that we're going to talk about in the chapter. So today we're just talking about the short run, right? There's a fixed cost. And so in the short run, because there's that fixed cost, a business might end up producing with a loss just because the fixed cost is a sunk cost. There's nothing that they can do about it. But in the long run, if they continued producing with a loss, then of course they're going to close their business and go do something else. Okay, but in the short run, you might also have to shut down if you can't pay for your variable costs. Now, your fixed costs are fixed. They're sunk costs. You can't do anything about that. But your variable costs are the things that you have to pay as you go along. You have to pay for your workers. You have to pay for ingredients, electricity, whatever it is, right? So things that you are paying for as you go along. If you don't have the money to pay for them, then you would not be able to produce anything. And then we'd say that you would have to shut down. You just wouldn't have enough money to produce anything. Okay, so you have to be making enough money, like the price has to be high enough so that you're at least paying for your variable inputs. Otherwise, you would not be able to produce. Okay, all right, so variable costs need to be paid for. So the price has to be high enough to cover the variable costs. All right, so the price has to be greater than or equal to your average variable cost. All right, so as long as the price is greater than or equal to your minimum average variable cost, then you can produce. And otherwise you can't produce. Okay, so on the next page is an example where the firm will produce, but they'll be losing money. Good. All right. So remember from chapter 11 that the average variable cost curve is also U-shaped, and the average variable cost curve will have an equilibrium with the marginal cost curve at the minimum point, as with the average total cost curve, right? So we have 2 minimum points, and that's where the MC crosses. Anyway, so here's our price in this example. Now, the firm will choose to produce this quantity here because that's where the price equals the marginal cost. So the firm will produce this quantity here. Now, we've got all the cost curves here. So the first one up at the top is the average total cost. So that tells us for sure they're going to be losing money. The next one down here is the average variable cost. All right, so they are getting paid more than that, so they will be able to pay for the variable cost. And then the bottom one here is the average fixed cost. Okay, now total revenue. Total revenue is going to be the price times the quantity. Right, so price times quantity, so that will be the letters B, C, and D. The total cost, though, is including A as well, the average cost times the quantity. So A, B, C, D is the total cost. So in the diagram then, they're losing money. The difference between the average cost and the price. So area A is their loss. So for profit, we can put minus A. But they will not shut down. They will continue to produce because the amount of revenue that they're earning is enough, more than enough to pay for their variable cost. Their total variable cost would be the average variable times the quantity. So C and D. C and D would be the total variable cost. So they're making more than that, right? They're making B, C, and D. This is their variable cost, C and D. So after they've paid for their variable cost, then they will have B left over, which is not enough to pay for the fixed cost, right? Area B is what they would have left over. It's not big enough to pay for the fixed cost. So they are losing money. So the total fixed cost is area D. All right, so the price is above the average variable cost, so they will continue production because they can pay for their variable costs. All right, let's see here. If though, okay, so if, here we go, if the price is less than that minimum AVC, then they don't have enough money to pay for the variable costs. And so if you didn't have any money to pay workers, you're not going to have anybody working for you. You know, if you don't have enough money to, say, buy tomato sauce and cheese so that you can make pizzas, then you're just not going to be able to make any pizzas. So then the firm would have to shut down. Good. Okay. So in this diagram, let's look at these two important prices that you've learned so far. So a couple pages ago, we were talking about the break-even price. That is at the bottom of the ATC. Oops. Sorry, that's not straight. That's very not straight. Okay, it was supposed to be a straight line. Okay, that is the break-even price. And then the shutdown price is at the bottom of the AVC. Okay. Now, when the price is more than the break-even price, so above that point, that is where you're going to be happy. You're going to be earning profits. So the firm will earn a profit. If the price is less than that, but more than the shutdown price, then the firm will produce, but they will be incurring a loss. And again, they would only do that in the short run. If they kept losing money, they'd eventually close down. And then finally, prices that are less than the shutdown price, that is when the firm cannot afford to operate at all. So they will shut down. Okay, so using apples as an example. Okay, so different farmers, of course, have different costs. Now, sometimes what I see where my parents live is orchards that are abandoned. What's happening there? Why would the farmer abandon their orchard? It's because the price they're paid is not covering their variable costs. Like, they can't even hire workers to work for them. So what do? They walk away, right? They shut down. Other times, the price is low, they're losing money, but they keep producing anyway. And for example, they still pay for the workers to pick the apples, and they still take the apples to the packing house and sell them, even though they're going to lose money. And that's just because at least they can recover some of their costs. And so that would be when the price is in this range here. Other times, and especially if they're producing certain like specialty apples maybe that have a higher price, then they're going to be earning a profit. And then of course, they are hiring workers and have a smile on their face. Okay, now, Toyo's toy trucks. All right, so filling in the columns. First column, fixed cost. We're not told what it is, but we can figure it out. What's the fixed cost? Yes, the $50. That's right. So fixed cost is just the first one here, right? When the quantity is 0, it is the cost. So 50. All right, so that will be all the way down, 50, 50, 50. And then the variable cost is just the difference between the total cost and the fixed cost. Okay, so obviously 0 here. 80 minus 50, 105 minus 50, 125 minus 50, and so on. Okay, and then average variable cost. All right, so then we take the variable cost divided by the quantity. So let's see, I can do that one. 30 divided by 1, 55 divided by 2. And 30 divided by 5. Okay. All right, first question, what is Terry's shutdown price? Shutdown price is the minimum of the average variable cost. And that is here, right, $25. Now we've got two 25s, but we would pick the equilibrium with the MC. So that would be at a quantity of 4. And so then, yeah, so $25. If the price is 20, how many trucks will Terry produce? So, trick question. None. Good. Q equals 0 because the 20 is less than the shutdown price. This is the absolute minimum, 25. So at $20, he will not produce anything. What will the profit be? So then it would just be his loss of the fixed cost, which is $50. Next, the price is 30. Okay, so that's more than the shutdown price. So then he will produce. So that's the first thing you check. Is the price more than the shutdown price? Okay, so then the next thing is how much to produce is where the price equals MC. Now we've got two 30s, but again, we skipped the first one. So this one here. So that will be at a quantity of 5. And then calculating the profit, we need the average cost, 36. So using the formula P minus ATC times Q, all right, any questions? Good. Okay. All right. So let's see. So the next thing to talk about is the supply curve. So let me just talk a little bit before we do the notes. Now, in chapter 3, you guys learned about the supply curve. And in chapter 3, you were given like linear functions to graph the supply curve. And it would be a straight line like this, and it would just show that as the price goes up, then the quantity produced would increase. Now, this was fine using a linear equation because it made the calculation simple, but it wasn't actually very realistic. So let's say the function was let's say that. Okay, so let's say that's the function. So it starts at 2. Now, what this implies is that when the price reaches, say, 210, the producer will be producing a certain quantity. Let's see, what quantity would they produce at 210? Let's see. Oh, 1. That's right. Okay, so they'd produce 1 unit. Now, is that realistic, though? If the price were 210, would you start producing 1 unit of something? No, that's not realistic. It's not realistic because of the fixed cost, right? To start a business, you need to get like a building or vehicles or whatever it is, right? You need equipment. And it's not worth it to get all that stuff if you're only going to produce 1 unit. So that's not how it works. The way it works is that if you're thinking about starting a business, you're only going to start the business if the price is high enough for you to get all those fixed inputs. And then once you've got all those fixed inputs, you're not just going to produce 1 unit of something, you're going to start producing like lots, right? Like you open a pizza restaurant, you're going to start producing, a few hundred pizzas each day, right? So this supply curve is not very realistic. What's more realistic is the supply curve that accounts for the fixed costs and the fact that the firm wants to only produce when the price is at least more than the shutdown price. And also then, this supply curve reflects the marginal cost. So we did talk about that earlier in the course, but now we know for sure, because what we've been doing today, what we've been doing all day today is we've been using a marginal cost curve and a price, whatever that is, and figuring out the quantity that the producer would produce at different prices. So the supply curve is actually going to look a bit more like this, marginal cost. So instead of a straight line, it's going to have the little swoosh there. But we also need to have the information about the shutdown price in there as well. Okay, so let's just write this down, and then we'll talk about it more next class. So this is the last thing we'll do today. I'll just get you guys to write this down. There we go. Okay, so the short run individual supply curve. Okay, so it'll show the relationship between the market price and the individual producer's profit maximizing quantity of output, but taking into account those fixed costs.